All right, so in this video, I want to talk a little bit about rates and compounding periods and kind of how that works. So let's work with some terminology here briefly. So the nominal rate is also known as the stated or quoted rate, sometimes the annual percentage rate. The periodic rate is going to be the rate per period. And the way you find that is you take the nominal rate and you divide it by the number of compounding periods per year. So if the nominal rate is 10%, and we're dealing with something that's going to be compounded semi-annually. There are two semi-annual periods in a year. So I'm going to take the 10% divided by 2, and that's going to get me a 5% rate per semi-annual period or per 6 months. And so that would be the periodic rate. The effective rate is going to be the actual rate per year once you factor in the compounding. So in order to kind of see what that means and why we care about it, let's look at a brief little example here. So let's suppose we had a 10% per year simple annual interest compounding kind of a situation. So it's just 10% once per year and it's compounded in. So that's all we've got. And we compare that to a 10% per year compounded semi-annual. Okay. So the effective annual rate of 10% simple annual compounding once per year is going to be 10%. In other words, you get 10% at the end of the year and that's it, right? So that's all there is to it. But if I have the second example, which is 10% per year compounded semi-annually, what's going to happen there is we're going to take the 10% per year that's being compounded semi-annually. There are two semi-annual periods in a year. So I'm going to take the 10% divided by 2, and I'm going to get 5% per 6 months. So really what's going to happen is for the first 6 months, at the end of the first 6 months, we're going to get 5%. Then for the second 6 months, I'm going to get another 5%. But here's the thing. That second 6 months, I'm getting 5% of what I started with, but I started the second 6 months with some interest I got at the end of the first 6 months. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to get interest 5% on not just the original balance, but also on the interest I got from the first 6 months. And so I'm going to wind up with a little bit more interest. And the way to find that is basically what we're going to do is I'm going to take that 10% per year. I'm going to divide it by 2 because there are two compounding periods per year when it's semi-annual. So I'm going to get 5% per 6 months. And so I'm going to take 1.05, 105%. So I'm going to take 105% of what I started, and I'm going to multiply that times 105% for the second 6 months. So 105% for the first 6 months, 105% for the second 6 months. And I multiply those together to give me the compounding effect. Then I subtract off 1 because I'm kind of pulling out the principal, the original investment, to find out what I actually wound up with. And when you do that calculation, what you're going to find out is you're going to end the period with having gotten 10.25%, which is a bit more than 10%. And it's basically because you got interest the first 6 months, then the second 6 months, you got interest on the interest. Now, if we did monthly compounding, I would take the 10%, I would divide it by 12, and then I would take that, add 1 to it, and then multiply 12 of those terms together, and then subtract off 1 from it, and that would tell me what my overall effective rate was. And basically what you're going to find is that for a particular nominal annual rate, the more frequently it is compounded, the higher the effective rate for the period. So if you are investing, you want to invest at the highest effective rate. So you can have two investments that have the same nominal rate, but they compound differently. One's maybe annual, one's maybe monthly. And so the effective rate could be different. So if I was investing, I would want the highest effective rate. If I am borrowing, I would want to borrow at the lowest effective rate. So if we had loans that were compounding with different frequency, let's say one is compounding weekly, the other one compounds monthly, we run the calculation, we figure out what's the effective rate and compare those to make sure that you are borrowing at the lowest effective rate. So if you're borrowing money, one of the things you should ask is not just what is the nominal or quoted rate, what is the effective rate? And make, because that's really giving you a measure of what it's really going to cost you. The nominal rate doesn't really fully capture the effect of the compounding unless it's used only one period per year, which generally isn't going to be true. So if you're borrowing, ask what's the effective rate. If you're investing, figure out what's the effective rate. Okay, hopefully that helps. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.